All right, here we go. Andrew Kulha, Anthony Moeglin. We are back for, if you can believe it, episode 5 of the Packers Roundtable. It's flying by this season, huh?
Dude, flying by. Episode 5. I think we're going into, what are we going into? Week 6? Yeah,
Week
week
6
6.
in the NFL. Yep.
Insane. Week 7 of college football, high school football in Ohio is like wrapping up. Like crazy. It's funny, man. I say it every week, but like you just wait all summer long and you just beg for it to be September. And then September comes, you blink and it's October. Like we're already almost midway through October. It's crazy.
We're going to be talking about Thanksgiving football soon. And
Dude, we're going to be talking about Maction, Thanksgiving football, Black Friday, like all that stuff coming up soon.
That's going to be fun, and we'll get into it. But for now, let's stay in the here and now. Let's stay in the here and now. We were just talking offline a little bit, and I was admitting to you that my enthusiasm is waning at the moment regarding the Green Bay Packers, and that's probably a natural reaction to the bye week. You know, it's been a little while since we've had some action to talk about, but the action we have talked about, and you were right there alongside, was the tie to the Dallas Cowboys. And before that, the loss to your Cleveland Browns. So I'm desperate for a win right now, man. I am desperate for a win. And the Cincinnati Bengals are up next. So,
dude, it's interesting because like oftentimes, very, very, very rarely, and this isn't breaking news, but very rarely do you go into a bye week off a tie, right? Yeah. And it's like, at the very least, you never want to go in off a loss. Like that's the worst thing ever. Practice sucks. Hard to enjoy the days off, like all that stuff. But you go in off a win, it's sunshine and rainbows, man. Practice is great. Maybe you're catching a couple days at the beach. Maybe you're getting to hang out with your family, whatever it may be. But you go in off a tie and it's like, it's kind of, especially the way that game went, it probably felt more like a loss in some ways. Yeah. So that's a long 2 weeks. And to be focused on the Cincinnati Bengals coming out is like awesome because unfortunately for them, their seasons kind of got flipped on its head when Joe Burrow had his toe surgery, and they're playing Jake Browning. And if you watched a lick of football on Sunday, if you watch a lick of football on Sunday, that Browning's struggling a little bit. But at the end of the day, they still have two of the best receivers in football in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And, they are going to be scrappy regardless of who's playing quarterback. So they do present quite an interesting challenge coming out of the bye week.
Yep. Looking at Jake Browning, just to quickly peruse what he's been up to lately. He's thrown this season for 6 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. So we're going to get into that game a little bit more, but this is a game that, for all intents and purposes, the Packers should go in and win. Even more so than that, and I wrote about this on Packers Roundtable, I don't think a win is good enough, Anthony. I think a win is the bare minimum. Now, you don't want to lose, of course, because losing, that's a world I don't want to walk into. But this is a team that needs to make a statement. Those first 2 weeks, they came out looking like gangbusters. And then, we've talked through these last 2 weeks, just kind of a interesting dichotomy between what the team started off as and what these last 2 weeks have looked like. So the bye couldn't have come at a better time, in my opinion, because at the very least, this gave the team a chance to mentally reset.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like they need to get a lot of their confidence back because you come off that Browns game, and you're like, that was a fluke, that was crazy. They needed a miracle to win, and they did, and they got it. But it's ultimately that loss is going to stick with you all season long. And then you had a number of chances against the Cowboys to win that game. Like there's a real world where people are in. You're not going to hear me argue against it, but the Packers should be 4-0. Like that's what it should be, but it's not. But also the good part is that you're not out of it. And what you've seen is that Detroit's, I guess in the North specifically, Detroit has got it going on. They feel like they've figured out their offensive approach post Ben Johnson. The Bears are going to be a tougher out, but still, I feel like they're maybe a year or two away from being a real contender. And the Vikings, I watched it firsthand on Sunday. The Vikings leave a lot to be desired, with Carson Wentz being at quarterback, and obviously J.J. McCarthy is going to come back, but he's still a very big question mark. And more importantly, their offensive line is beat up. So sitting there at 2-1-1, you're down, but you're certainly not out of it. And looking the part, I think, super important on Sunday because you want to get that confidence back. Like, it would be really nice from a Packers perspective if Jordan Love went out and threw for 320 and 3 touchdowns and everybody looked good and Josh Jacobs got rolling behind the offensive line and the defense stood up tall. And who cares who you're playing at quarterback? Yeah, if you're playing Jake Browning, keep him out of the end zone. Like, that should be the goal. And do your thing against Jamar Chase and do your thing against T. Higgins. So I think you're right. Like, how it looks, is very important, for the outlook of the Packers season.
At the end of the day, I think you just want to walk away with a win. We've talked about this in the past, especially in this September, October part of the season. When we're in the playoffs, talking a Super Bowl run, you're not going to really remember the details of here's how this happened. And what we're going to remember, and I'm going to remember it every week, is when they lost to the Browns in week 3. Mm-hmm. And then if they beat the Bengals, which they should, whether it's by 3 or 3 touchdowns, ultimately that's not going to matter in the grand scheme of things. Now, with that said, the point that I've been making on Packers Roundtable is that we've seen 2 teams, and I think that's a great transition into topic number 2 here. So we've seen a team that has come out and beat the NFC North back-to-back champions in the Lions. They came out on Thursday Night Football and beat Washington Commanders team that made it to the NFC Championship last year. So that right there, you're thinking, okay, this is a Super Bowl contender, and that's what we were talking about through those first 2 weeks. You can chalk up the game to the Bengals, against the Browns. You can chalk that up to a team that believed its own hype a little bit too much and maybe got complacent. It's that Cowboys game that's really stuck in my craw. Now, I think the Cowboys are better than what we thought they were initially. Dak Prescott, we've talked about, is still a top 10 quarterback in this league. So playing to a tie in Dallas, it's not something I'm going to lose a ton of sleep about. But it's just kind of the dichotomy, again, using that word, between the team that we saw the first 2 weeks and the team that showed up in Cleveland and Dallas. So I'd be interested to hear from your perspective, which Packers team is the real team from what you see?
Yeah, I think that it's somewhere in the middle. And that's the cheap way out of it, because the team you saw against Cleveland, you'll never see again. And I think you can be confident in that. The team you saw against, maybe against the Lions, you may not see that, again, because that was a really good performance, and you kind of caught the Lions. The stars kind of aligned perfectly. Lions coming off their first game without Ben Johnson, all of the things, right? And I do think the truth lies somewhere in the middle of those, because this is a good football team. They have the ingredients to be very good. And we spent a lot of time last week with Evan on, kind of talking about Matt LaFleur and kind of what he is as a head coach. Like, hopefully, right, a good coach will learn from these last 2 weeks, right? Where, all right, the mistakes you made against Cleveland, those will never show up again. The mistakes you made against Dallas, those will never show up again. So that when you do get a performance or you get an offensive performance that, Jordan Love's throwing for 330 and it feels like it's coming out of his hand perfectly, that you don't give up 40 points. Or on the flip side, hey, when that offense is struggling like it did in Cleveland, you're able to not make that critical mistake and get the wins you're supposed to get. Because, I really think the NFL comes down to what you do on the margins, right? Like, there's games on the season where you're supposed to win, right? The Packers were supposed to beat the Browns. The Packers were supposed to beat, probably supposed to beat the Cowboys. And now that's 2 of those. So you have to then go chase 2 games you weren't supposed to win. So, but where do those show up? Is it the Eagles there in that second week of November, or do you have to go sneak the Lions again, right, in Detroit that time, or do you have to go sneak the Broncos, right? Like, there's a couple more of those games where you're like, maybe we're not supposed to win this, but we now have to because we put ourselves behind the 8 ball,
Sure.
and that's the world they have to live in now.
Interesting. I like that analogy that if you lose 2 games, you shouldn't. And again, let's just call the Cowboys game a loss for all intents and purposes. And when you got to go find them, my thought would be, especially considering how last year went for the Packers. I don't know if you remember this, but they sucked in the NFC North, man. They didn't win a game in the NFC North.
1-5.
Yeah, 1-5. So in my world, you take care of the division first and foremost. That's where you want to start, and then you take it from there.
And Andrew, true, to that point, right? Like those two stinkers were, one was in the AFC, so like ultimately it may come back to bite you, but doesn't factor into the tie break. Doesn't affect like literally that's one where like, hey, if you're gonna lose one, that's the one. And thank you, appreciate it. That was a fun Sunday, probably the only fun Sunday I'll have all year. But and then the Cowboys one, that one does hurt though, because I think it hurts for a couple reasons. And I think the more important one that's more apt for our show tonight is like, if they get into a shootout, that should scare Packers fans, because that's what that was, right? Your offense can run the race. Your offense can sprint with anybody. And the Cowboys were a perfect example of what of one of the better offenses you'll see. The concern is that the defense is going to let you down now. And that would be the more concerning part, because if you do get into a shootout later in the year against anybody, you're going to fall back. Everyone's memory is going to go back to Dak Prescott dicing him up for 350, right? Like that's where people are going to go, and that's kind of the more concerning part to me about that tie.
Yep. Now, real quick, again, I mentioned that I think the Cowboys might be a little bit better than what we thought they might be. So they're 2-2-1. Obviously, they've got that tie on their resume, but they just went out and beat the New York Jets, who everybody has beaten, but it was a 37-22 win. So if you're keeping track, in their wins, the Cowboys have scored 40. In the tie, they scored 40, and then against the Jets, they scored 37. So that's a high-powered offense. And in the NFL, at least, when you get a high-powered offense and a tough defense together, usually it's the offense, especially in this era, that comes through and picks up the win, or at least has the advantage, let's say. So just want to point that out. Maybe it's not as bad as we initially thought upon that first watch.
And so that's the one thing you always got to remember. And I always try to say it in every show that I do, is something that you learn when you play the game, is that it's never as good as you think. It's never as bad as you think. So I always remember, like you come off a game and you throw 4 touchdowns and 310 yards, and you feel like the king of the world. And then you go into the film room and you're like, man, I got lucky on this throw, or hey, we were real close to making a mistake here, or this should have been picked off. Like, it's never as good as you think. And then the flip side, when you think you sucked and you threw 3 picks or whatever, you go back in and you think it's the worst thing you're ever going to see in your life, and you're like, ooh, I was this close to that one going through, or this was almost happened. And so I always take that with a grain of salt. It's never as good as you think, and it's never as bad as you think. And, the Packers, while disappointed, they still have everything they want right in front of them.
Absolutely. We were talking baseball before the show, and there's an old baseball term that water always finds its own level, meaning, whether it's too high, too low, what the team is what the team is. And ultimately, the Packers, I believe, have a Super Bowl roster on both offense and defense. That they have pieces. Special teams is a different story, but maybe that's something they worked on in the bye. So let's move on here. There's some big injury updates for the Packers. A couple that aren't necessarily quote unquote sexy, but they're very important for this team. So the Packers started out with a gentleman named Zach Tom at right tackle, Aaron Banks at left guard. So Tom, they just gave a ton of money to in a new deal, and then they went out and they had signed Banks in free agency. So he was really their big free agent pickup of the offseason. Side note: before the whole Micah Parsons thing, Aaron Banks was kind of the only thing we could talk about, so that was not really fun. But Tom starting right tackle. Banks was the starting left guard for week 1. They both got injured in week 1 against the Lions. They both missed week 2, came back in week 3, and then they both had to exit again. So they were dealing with issues throughout the first quarter of this season. Both were in practice today, and that's of October 6th, so Monday, heading into the game against the Bengals in week 6. So real quickly, and there's an even bigger update I want to get to, but 2 offensive linemen, 2 starting on the right side. From your perspective, especially as a former quarterback, I'd love to hear how big that is.
Huge. It's insanely big, because that's a spot from a quarterback's point of view. When you're full strength up front, and furthermore, when somebody, then they'll never say it out loud, but you know where the weak link's at, and it's really hard to take your eye off it, right? You always have a periphery. Your peripheral is always wherever that weak spot is, and that clock speeds up in your head. But when you got that full strength, when you got your guys up front and you're at full strength, that just takes that takes one thing off the quarterback's plate. Like the quarterback's plate's full on every single play, but if he can just get that's hammered down and he feels comfortable there, it's so big for the at the quarterback position.
Absolutely. So that's exciting news for the Packers. Again, another case of the bye coming at the right time. They really struggled against pass rush. Obviously, you saw with Cleveland. Now, I think there's a lot of teams that will struggle with Myles Garrett. So let's take that for what it is. But even
unless you wear purple and gold.
You're right. But then there's the Cowboys game. The Cowboys definitely got some more pressure on Jordan Love than I think you'd want. Only had one sack, but they did have a couple tackles for loss, 4 quarterback hits. So getting the team back to full strength, or at least close to it on the offensive line, that's a big deal. Now, let's transition to a player who's not yet at full strength, but there is a lot of excitement about his reimmersion onto the roster, and that'd be wide receiver Christian Watson. Watson was the second-round pick in 2022 out of North Dakota State. This guy, in terms of athleticism, he's everything you look for in an elite wide receiver. 6'4", 208 pounds, so he's got the size. Hell of a runner. He's got that straight line speed where you can really take the top off of defense. The biggest problem with Watson, as you sometimes see with these elite athletes who kind of have that quick twitch athleticism, is leg injuries. He's dealt with knees, hamstrings, ACL, you name it. Injuries have been really the one thing that have hampered Watson, but the Packers reopened his practice window as he's been rehabbing from an ACL that he suffered at the end of last season. All the stuff that I've seen online, and granted, this is all hype. You see videos of guys stretching and think, holy shit, he's back. He's back.
Think he could play this weekend?
Yeah, it's a big deal, though, to have Christian Watson back, because he adds an element to this offense that the Packers have not had. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on Watson as a quarterback, as somebody who's kind of on the outside looking in, not as a fan, and we'll kind of take from there.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you hit it right on the head. Like where it stands out to me is that vertical speed that he has, that straight line speed, because it's guys like that are few and far between. And with the way that the Packers have kind of structured that wide receiver room, where it's a bunch of just like good players, and you don't really have that standout guy. Everybody's got to be a star in their role. So like for Watson, it is fly, dude. Take the top off, posts. Go balls. Like, you're responsible for that top half of the field, and that's where you have to be great. And then everybody else, Romeo Doubs, Reed, everybody, you have to dominate that intermediate part of the field. And when you take that big ball away, everything can kind of shrink down a little bit. And you've seen the consequences of that, or the results of that, if you will. So from an offensive perspective, it's massive. And you're just excited for the young kid. Like, I remember, I remember the draft pick, and everyone was like, oh, wow, they finally drafted a receiver, but it was in the second round. And it was a guy from North Dakota State that, like, everyone kind of knew, but kind of didn't know. And then he comes in, and his first ball ever, he drops it. And it's like, oh, and it's tough. And you're like, you felt so bad for the kid. And then he's like, he's become a very good receiver in the league. He does deal with a couple drop issues, but just excited for him. ACLs are brutal, and especially for those guys who their livelihood's based off of running fast. Like, that's a tough thing. So excited for him to come back. Now, a reverse question for you, Andrew. Inside, being the fan of a Packers fan for so long, what are the thought? What's the sentiment around Watson? Like, what does the Packers feel around him?
So I think it depends on who you're talking to and what type of fan you're talking to. So for me, I tend to be, I think, a little bit pessimistic, if not realistic, when it comes to, okay, so who are these players? With Watson, I think anything you get is gravy at this point. He's, that rookie season you mentioned, his very first pass that he ended up dropping. He ended up catching 7 touchdowns that year, 611 yards. he had a game against the Dallas Cowboys in that season, his rookie season, where he caught 3 touchdowns in one game. So this is a guy who has high upside.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time putting my faith in somebody who has multiple injuries throughout the course of their early career, especially when we're talking about the term of a quick twitch athlete. And maybe that's not like an everyday term, kind of inside baseball type stuff. But, you mentioned it. His whole game relies on being able to get off the line of scrimmage and just get down the field. And a lot of those guys tend to have issues, with their hamstrings, with the muscles, because everything they do athletically is so wound up and tight, and we see that all the time. He's far from the only one. So my thought is, if you can get, 10 to 12 games out of Watson in a season and maybe, 5 to 6 touchdowns, that's a really good year. Now, he's not somebody I would necessarily want to give a ton of money to, but I'm also not the guy who's paid to make that decision. So what I'm really interested in is something we haven't touched on yet, and that's the combination of him and Matthew Golden. So Christian Watson's 40-yard dash at the NFL Scouting Combine, he ran a 4.36 40, which is just super fast.
Smoking.
Golden in this past combine ran a 4.29. So you're looking at 2 guys who can just run past people. And I don't think the Packers have had that at all in the Matt LaFleur era. So if this guy can come back healthy and make an impact in this season, I'd be really interested to see how LaFleur can use these 2 wideouts to really take the top off the defense.
Yeah, I mean, those are two of the fastest guys you could possibly have, and that's 2 weapons that you really want. But it'll be interesting to see. And if there's a guy who's going to do it and going to do it right, it's going to be LaFleur, and he's going to dial it up. And I think more importantly, like, if you're able to use those guys together in tandem, it's amazing for not only them, but for the rest of the offense. Like, that opens up everything else. Those intermediate windows become so much more open, because now, instead of having to worry about one burner, you got 2 burners that you're going to have to deal with. And those intermediate throws and those windows are going to be wide. Tucker Kraft is going to be a beneficiary of that. Like I said, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, like, all those guys are going to be huge beneficiaries of just speed on the outsides.
Not to mention Jordan Love, Jordan Love. The one thing I like about how Brian Gutekunst, who's the general manager of the Packers, how he's built this wide receiver team is, there's the jokes that there's a bunch of wide receiver threes, or, just a bunch of guys, but not really a star. But I don't know if he said it, but what I've heard is kind of like, what he's tried to do is put together a basketball team, meaning, on a basketball team, or at least how it used to be, in the NBAs, you had a center who his job was to rebound, and clean up in the paint. You had a point guard who facilitated, shooting guard who shot, and the way this Packers wideout room is situated is, ideally you've got a player who can kind of do everything you're looking for in each wideout. So you've got a couple deep guys. You've got a guy like Romeo Doubs who's just money in the red zone, and guy we haven't talked about, Dontavian Wicks, who's kind of, if you wanted to talk about the mid-range, kind of that middle of the field, a guy who can get those 10, 12-yard
tough catches.
Yeah, tough catches, run after the catch guy, and then there's Tucker Kraft. So interested to see, what this offense can look like. I think I'm still holding my breath on Watson. I'd like to see him out there. I'd like to see him healthy. And we'll see. I think this is another great transition. We seem to be pretty good at that.
Hey, this isn't a we. You're running the show, brother. You're the one who's good at who's getting better.
I run a tight ship. I want to talk about a couple of the stars on this team. And we didn't have a ton of prep on this one, so really we're going to be getting your just kind of your base analysis and your instant thoughts on this. And I'm happy to chime in too, but I really enjoy your perspective as an outsider, because and that is totally a derogatory term too, as an outsider.
You'll never catch me wearing a cheese head ever.
That's right. So let's talk about expectations. Quarter of the season's gone. Forget about it. It no longer exists. We've barely talked any defense, so I want to start with Micah Parsons. Okay,
Yeah.
he's a superstar, man. The numbers aren't necessarily there yet. We know he's been kind of, getting his legs back underneath him. Didn't play a lot in the preseason. I'd love to hear kind of what your expectations would be for a guy like Parsons, because to me, I feel like he's barely scratched the surface, and I'd anticipate or I'd want to see, this next stretch here, a couple multi-sack games.
Yeah.
I really want him to make his presence known.
It needs to be. Okay. So 2.5 sacks on the season through 4 games. Those are solid numbers, but if you span that out over the course of 18 games, you're looking at, let's see if I can do some quick math here, 9 sacks, 9-ish, maybe 10 sacks. So that's okay. But when you trade what the Packers traded for him, he needs to be game changer type of a guy. Like that's the level that he has to play at. And unfortunately, that's, with great power comes great responsibility. Like if you're going to be called one of the best pass rushers in the league, you need to be it. And you need to really change games. Now I can speak to this because, I have one in Cleveland, right. With Myles Garrett, and, he doesn't win football games, but he impacts the games in many ways. And, for Micah Parsons does that. Okay. He's the guy where you start your game plan with, right? How do they block number one? And you slide protections to him, you chip him, you put running backs to him. So all that is important. But when it's winning time, and you almost saw it in that game against the Cowboys where, he saved the touchdown and it was like, all right, now you go cash that in. Like that would have been the play that everyone remembers. Instead, it all shakes out the ways it does. But as these games get more important and deeper into the season, that's when number one has to, 1, stay healthy, and 2, be a game-changing type guy. He has it in him, and it's got to start coming to light here as you get into the second quarter of the season.
My anticipation is that they've had some restrictions on him as he's gotten in over the first couple weeks.
Okay. So I have to step back there because I forgot. He is coming off that back injury, which hand up, thought it was fake for sure, and then he got to Green Bay and it was actually real.
I thought it was fake too, but we'll just say that especially after the bye week, he's now had he's only been in Green Bay for like a month and a couple days. It's crazy to think about. So I think he's going to get his sea legs under him. I anticipate a really strong couple games here after the bye. The other guy I want to talk about is Josh Jacobs on the offensive side. So we'll have a defender and now a guy on offense. Jacobs has 80 carries on the season, 266 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's averaging 3.3 yards per carries. I'd like to see that closer to 4. Now, granted, the offensive line has had issues. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Jacobs. He's an all-pro running back, and he's a guy who, we saw him kind of start to break out a little bit against Dallas. But, again, he's somebody who I think has more in the tank.
Yeah, more in the tank for sure. And we talked about, hey, what happens when you get both your speed demons back on this team when Watson does come back? Like it opens up the run game for him as well. So like he's going to be taking advantage of that. But just kind of looking at his stats here, I know that Browns game is going to really weigh his numbers down. 16 carries for 30 yards and no scores. However, I think he's been fairly solid, right? In the 2 wins, he's rushed for over 60 yards, which is good in today's NFL. That game against the Lions, 19 carries for 66, and then a game against Washington on Thursday night, 23 for 84. So your yards per attempt aren't that high, but when you're able to tote the rock 23 times, you're able to carry it. He carried it 22 against the Cowboys. I think that sticks out to me as well. Like, hey, they will have to bring down his usage a little bit because you don't want to have him have a great September and October and then be spent come November and December. But when the weather gets bad, when these games get tight, when you have to control the clock, having a bell cow like Josh Jacobs is such a luxury. And I think it's a steady start to this season, but I think he's only going to continue to improve and get better.
Absolutely. Let's finish up here with really the only thing that matters right now for the Packers, and that's picking up.
On to Cincinnati. We're on
On
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati. That's right. We're on Cincinnati. I love that reference. What a great reference. The Bengals are 2-3. They're second in the AFC North still, despite being on a 3-game losing skid. So your Browns couldn't make up any ground over the past couple weeks. No Joe Burrow. So this is a franchise without Burrow that I don't think they've got a shot to pick up a couple more wins here on the season. From your perspective, what's going on with the Bengals?
Yeah, they should be 1-4. The Browns in week 1 missed a 30-yard field goal to beat them. So you should be 1-4, and that was with Joe Burrow. One thing about the Bengals is like when Burrow's out, and now it's become like a trend. Like every other year, he gets a major injury. So like this isn't a new thing for them and for the Bengals. But when he's out, the vibes they're a roller coaster team.
Yeah,
dude, I'm telling you what, like if they did get off a little bit in that second half against Detroit. But before then, like it's all-time bad body language. It's their stars and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Chase Brown in the backfield and all these guys, like they mope around and, look like they don't want to be there and all this stuff. And like, it's real. And it's hard to like blame them. They all play in the Super Bowl with their quarterback and they know their quarterback's not going to be there. So they get it. So like this is one, like you talk about games you are like our must wins. Like this is a must win game for the Packers. You cannot, absolutely positively cannot slip up in this one because there's no reason that you should.
The Bengals have been outscored in the past couple games, 113-37. And if you kind of dig into it a little bit and watch that game against Detroit, the Lions were actually leading 28-3 heading into the fourth quarter. So you said it. This is a game the Packers have to win, need to win. And again, ultimately win by 3 touchdowns. That doesn't matter, but I'd like to see this team come out and make a statement because frankly, I'd be kind of pissed if it's a 3-point win.
Yeah. Don't get frustrated on Sunday. This is a PSA to everybody. Don't get frustrated on Sunday when Jamar Chase is awesome. So he's going to make a couple catches. He is so good at football. It's amazing. And the one thing that people don't realize about him is how like tough he is. Like if he needs to, he'll like run through somebody and you'll be like, what the heck? Like he's prima donna, chains, the whole thing, receiver. No. That's not Jamar Chase. He will go across the middle. He'll make tough catches and get big hits. Also, they'll just start chucking it north to T. Higgins and he'll just go up and make catches. So when it happens, don't get frustrated. It's going to happen even with Jake Browning. Just buckle in and get back to the next play.
If you're a Packers fan, you just have to hope that guys like Micah Parsons, Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, Adrian Cooper, you just let the front seven do its job, and you're going to give up those plays. Aside, I was just thinking about LSU, and just a reminder that LSU team had Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson.
Was it our show that I was talking about this the other day? I don't think so. So,
no.
All right. So during my work days, if I'm like in like a busy time where I'm just kind of typing away, I'll sometimes throw on an old football game and just like let it go on the background, listen in on it, whatever. So I cut on, and this is to anybody who watches the show. If you have 30 minutes to kill or just need background noise, cut on the Bama versus LSU from 2019.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. It's that offense. It's Joe Burrow, quarterback, Clyde Edwards-Helaire at running back. You had Randy Moss's kid, I forget his name, was the tight end, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. And then on the other side, it was Tua Tagovailoa. It was Henry Ruggs, who obviously we know what happens there, Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, and there was one more. Oh, shoot. There was one more. Oh, Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle has a punt return in that game.
Yep.
It was – and by the way, they were handing it off to Najee Harris, which is – everywhere you looked, it was like, oh, NFL player, NFL. And like first round pick, second round pick, third round. It was crazy, but unbelievable. That team was out off the charts good, man.
Not even talk about defense. Derek Stingley, Grant Delpit, who we saw a couple weeks ago.
You guys remember Grant Delpit.
So, man, though I love. Maybe we should do a college football podcast next year as well because I love talking college football. But
dude, all right, are you? Well, okay. So we talked about who's your college football team? Is it Michigan?
That's the beauty in my world. I don't have a college football team. So
okay.
I love them all. And I can just sit down on a Saturday and have no stress and just watch football. Yep. On Sundays, I'm stressed, man. So it's I get kind of like the little appetizer the day before.
What
so
a blessing.
Hopefully there's not a ton of stress this weekend for the Packers. We'll find out. We're going to be back here no matter what talking about it. So, Anthony, I appreciate you, man. Appreciate all the listeners, the watchers, everybody on X and on Packers Roundtable.
Get over to Roundtable. Get over to Packers Roundtable. Make an account. Follow Andrew. And if you're so inclined, find me on Browns or Buckeyes and go follow.
A lot of good content out there on the Roundtable Sports Network. So for Anthony, I'm Andrew Kulha. We will talk to you guys next week, hopefully after a resounding Packers victory. Talk to y'all later.